So you're the perfect guest, Gary. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, yes. Sheila. Yeah, don't know about that, but go on.
You've got the heart and the mind covered on this for me. Let's start with your daughter's situation. So she's one of the many hundreds locked up in those halls.
Well, yeah, she went to Manchester the weekend before last. She's in a flat of 8 people. She didn't know any of them before. I'm glad to say they're getting on really well with each other.
That's good.
But on Sunday morning, I think 3 or 4 of them, including my daughter, came down with, fever, headache and a cough. So they are self-isolating. They've decided, the whole 8 of them have got to stay in now. They've ordered a test, so hopefully they'll get tested and we'll await the outcome of that.
And what about food and stuff like that and security? We've heard stories of security guards saying, come out at your peril and difficulty getting out to buy food. What help are they getting from outside for that?
Well, okay, my daughter Charlotte, she actually told me last night that their fridge isn't working and neither is their cooker, so that was a concern. But I've been in touch with her today, and apparently Manchester University, where she is, have been really good, that they're on it, and someone is coming out to see them today to actually put that right. So they are being supported, I'm pleased to say. I did see the reports at Manchester Met, which is the other university in Manchester, over the weekend. Now, they've not been verified, but I'd be very concerned if I heard that my child was in a halls of residence and there was police/guards on the door saying that they couldn't go in or out. I think that is a breach of their human rights. It's basically keeping them in prison. I don't think the university has a right to do that.
So it has a right just to request, well, mind you, from today, if you don't isolate when you're ill or somebody in your household is ill, you can be fined £1,000 or up to £10,000 for repeat offences. So, students will fall into that category, won't they? So there is an expectation of isolation, isn't there?
There is.
Now, a legal one.
The legal duty that we all have as citizens is to follow the guidance from the government/NHS. And of course, that is a personal liability that we all have if we don't follow that guidance. The university were imposing a kind of organisational discipline. Now, they are entitled to do that because they're a private entity. They have their rules of discipline. And I would say if students are behaving in a reckless way and they are not self-isolating in circumstances when they should be, then of course the university are entitled to take disciplinary proceedings against them. And that may ultimately end up with them being thrown out of the university. That can happen for any kind of breach of the rules, as it were. But actually,
so the doors
putting guards
should still be open?
The door should be open, absolutely, Sheila, yeah.
I mean, it's such a well, it's clearly not a quandary for you. You're very clear about it. But my sense is that, awful though it is, they should absolutely stay in that building. And the second you just, gave them the freedom to choose, many would choose to just walk out.
Well, we all have the freedom to choose.
We all have the freedom to do that. So why shouldn't they? Yeah.
So why shouldn't they? Absolutely.
Just because they're in a concentrated place doesn't make it.
But what they need to think about as students is: are they putting their future at the university and their future careers in jeopardy if they don't adhere to the rules that we all have to adhere to? That's a different thing, isn't it? That's personal responsibility.
So let's look at what if forget Manchester, any university. If any university takes this kind of measure, uses this kind of measure, or indeed your child just ends up in isolation in a block of flats because there's been an outbreak. If they say, look, I'm going home, my mum's going to collect me, I'm going home, that's a contravention, isn't it, of the guidelines on isolation?
Well, I'm not sure whether it is, Sheila, to be honest, because, well...
Isn't it a bit of a Dominic Cummings? It's what any father would do. Get in a car and go and get somebody from an infected household and sneak them back home. It's what any father would do. No, different to Dominic Cummings?
I'm not here to defend Dominic Cummings.
No, I'm just mulling it over. I'm mulling it over.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's a very interesting debate. I think it is similar to a situation where you come back from abroad and you've got to self-isolate. Now, I take the point that in this case with students, if they're self-isolating because they have symptoms, that is different from if you come back from abroad and you don't have symptoms. But I would take the view that as a parent, if you're worried about the welfare of your child, it would be in order for you to take reasonable steps, not putting anyone else in jeopardy by going to collect your child.
That was the Dominic Cummings defence. Wasn't it? That was his defence. He was, look, my wife was ill, I was getting symptoms, my mum and dad could look after them in separate houses, la la la. That's why we did it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but that's when we were in a national lockdown and there were rules about that. Now, in Manchester, where there is a lockdown, that's different again. I would say you probably are breaching the rules if you do that. But in other parts of the country where there isn't a local lockdown
Well, there
at the
isn't a
moment, I would say...
geographical lockdown to stop you going into and leaving Manchester. There is in Cardiff, but there isn't in Manchester.
Well, we've got a lockdown here in Lancaster, where I'm based. Now, my understanding of the local lockdown rules is that you actually shouldn't be leaving your area to go to another area. So my understanding is that the same applies to Manchester. Now, the problem we have, Sheila,
Other
is
than
that we
for
have
work or health reasons.
Yeah.
Well, if your child is in great distress, that's a health reason, isn't it? Arguably.
Yeah, it is, and I think what we're getting at here is that it's a really horrendous grey area, isn't it, in terms of what the guidance says, depending on which part of the country you're in and what the circumstances are. I think if you are behaving reasonably and not recklessly, you have an argument to say that what you've done is within the rules.
But those posters in the windows, as ever, some of them are really imaginative and funny. Help, send beer. I like that one. And I liked 9K well spent, just because it was so pithy and makes a very serious point very well. Is there any legal basis on which the university says it can put a disciplinary against the students for doing that?
Well, I guess every university will have its own rules and regulations, and if they're university halls, and they are by definition buildings that are owned by the university, and many landlords, private or institutionalised, have their rules about what tenants can do within their building and what you can put up at the window. So each university will have to look to its own rules and regulations and what those students have actually signed up to, and they've signed their tenancy agreements. My own view is that unless the signs are bringing the university into disrepute, unless there's something that's offensive or racist, then actually why shouldn't there be a freedom of expression? As you say, they're actually quite enjoyable and good for them, I would say.
Me too. And what your sense now as a dad then, that's the legal position, but as a dad... it's a bit of both, really. The consumer rights for students who've now found that they've given this money over to the university. All their lectures are online. Some of them can't even access their lectures, their online lectures. So clearly it's not going to feel like value for money, is it, when you get there?
Well, I think if you can't access your online lectures, that really is a serious issue. But I think if you can access your online lectures, then in many ways, students that have gone, like my daughter, for the first time this year as a fresher, or even students that are returning, they kind of knew what they were getting into this year. There's kind of, they're going there as informed consumers, in that we all know we've got COVID. We all knew before term started that there was going to be a degree of online, and even the universities that were saying there would be some face-to-face time, I think everyone realistically thought that may have to be pulled and may yet still have to be pulled later in the term.
Did you and your daughter know that a large chunk of her course might well be online?
Yeah, she'd already, she's a great researcher, and she'd already got it sorted out in her head what was going to happen when she started. She'd been told by the university that some of her lectures will be online. Others, she's doing medicine, others are going to be face-to-face, and that's what she's been told. But I guess there is a disclaimer hanging over all of that, in that if the situation changes with COVID, then some of the face-to-face is going to have to be pulled, isn't it? But she certainly went into it at the beginning of this term knowing what to expect.
Thank you. Well, including the lockdown, maybe? Not? Conceivably, anyway.
I'm talking about the course, not the lockdown.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Gary. I wish her well. Thank you, Gary Rycroft, consumer lawyer and dad in chief.